What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's me, Crendor, and welcome back to Crendor Talks in front of a shitty green screen. Today, we're talking about more Age of Sigmar 4.0. Before all the articles were coming out, I made my predictions of what I wanted, what I was looking for with Age of Sigmar 4.0. I will say Beast of Chaos removal was not on that list. A lot of people are like, what do you think of Beast of Chaos getting removed? And honestly, like, it sucks, but like, I don't really care. But I'm also coming from a position of, I have a bunch of armies in Age of Sigmar, and I also play Old World, so I'm like, I'll just play Beastmen in Old World. So like, it doesn't really impact me that much. I'm like, I just play them in Old World anyway, but it does suck, right? But I saw the rumors for months. I figured Bone Splitters were getting removed like last Battletome. I was like, dude, they removed rules and they're just not getting anything new. I think they're gone. So nothing really surprised me. I almost expected it. But you know, it is what it is. My hope is that Beasts of Chaos and Beastmen get kind of a, you know, rework into a new style of army in a few years where they get a bunch of new units. Maybe they bring back things like pestigores or different types of gores you can like ally with stuff. I don't know, just something fresh and new, and maybe even like Tarox is like a cool new model. That's my hope. Will it happen? Probably not, but I can dream. So, let's talk about Age of Sigmar 4.0 and what we've heard so far. So today, they just came out with the battle traits and army formations. And then the other weeks they did some other stuff, which I'll mention, but I'll start with this first, since this is right off the presses. So it appears that Finest Hour continues to exist, but as a Stormcast Eternals thing, where it's like once per turn in your hero phase, you can declare a friendly Stormcast Eternal unit that has not used this ability. This battle can use this ability, and then you can add 1 to wound rolls for that unit's combat attacks and 1 to save rolls, which is very strong, which means that heroic actions are going away. So that's the main takeaway here, is that heroic actions are gone. And I don't mind that. I think heroic actions were cool, but half the time we would play, and then people would be like, did you do your heroic action? And we'd be like, oh yeah. And the majority of the time it was either your Finest Houring, which you would like save for a moment, right? Or you would just roll for a command point, and that was it. Or you would just try to heal, I guess. But, you know, those things did feel like they can be tied into other aspects of the game, right? You can put them in the as like abilities, like what they just did, or, you know, as like a command at some point, kind of like what Rally is now. So I'm not too upset that the hero phase or the heroic actions are gone, so that's all right. And then they talk about some other battle traits, which are, you know, just your army abilities, right? And I think they're cool. I like the way they're doing it. I'm glad they didn't. It doesn't seem like they've pruned them down a ton. It seems like they've done just enough. So I'm pretty happy with that, because some abilities I didn't like in armies. Some felt like they had too many filler abilities. I feel like there's a lot of people that are upset where they're cutting so much, and to me, I think I enjoy when they cut down things that feel unnecessary. And, you know, sometimes you have an ability and it's like you never use it, but it's there just as like a fluff type ability, and then you'll cut it and people are like, bleh. I'm just like, nobody ever used this. It reminds me of like the weapon profile. Some people are really upset because in the Warscroll they did the weapon profile, and it seemed like there's only one weapon profile. People are like, what if you build shields? What if you have dual weapons, right? And I think that's cool in Warhammer Old World, where there's a lot more depth to the list building. There's a lot more options and all this stuff. But to me, Age of Sigmar is more of like the simplistic Old World, right? Like I always compare it to Retail WoW and Classic WoW, right? You know what you're getting with 2 different versions. And I think you need a version of the game that's easier to pick up and understand and play, and not have to figure everything out. Like, even as somebody who played Age of Sigmar, when I started playing 40k, it still was like difficult to be like, wait, so which weapon do I attack with? And like, I can use this melee. Do I get to use all these weapons? And people are like, no, you don't get to use all the weapons. And it's like, okay, I'm going to use this and this. And it's like, like, it's confusing for new people. You know, as somebody who, I've only been in the hobby, it's going to be 5 years actually, but you know, it's still not that long compared to some other people who've been in it like forever playing the game, that is. And so that's why I think with Warhammer Old World being a thing, it doesn't bother me as much. They're like cutting down on weapon options. If anything, I kind of like it, because there would be times like Saurus Warriors, for example. And I was like, dude, these Saurus Warriors, I actually really like the clubs, but I think the spears are better to get more of them in. And then you would have to like bypass that thing in your head of like, I want to do this cool thing, but if I want to be, you know, competitive in the game, I can just build them with spears and then they'll be competitive. But then you're like, oh, you know what? I could also just build them with clubs and spears and then say, you know, which they are. And then you get to the point where you're like, I can just do what I want and then say what they have. And that's kind of where I hit to a point where it's like, I guess I'll do that. Because then it generally felt like there was always a best option. Just like anything in any game, right? There's always a best option. And it felt like people would just run that. Like people like, you need to get more units in or more models to attack, so you take spears. But then it's like, oh, well, now that there's 3-inch attack range, now you would take clubs, right? And then it's like, well, what's the point of spears now? It's like, I guess I can give them rend. And then it hits a point where I'm just like, just give them all the same weapons. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't know. That might just be my personal preference, right? But I don't care. I think it's easier for, I think, a lot of people learning as well. And I'm sure they're taking that into consideration, right? So that's how I feel about the weapon. I got off track there quite a bit, but abilities seem cool. The battle traits and all that, and I think the Warscrolls seem pretty cool. I'm happy with how they're laid out. They seem much more simplistic, much more easy to read. Not everything's like crammed on one Warscroll. I know some people were like, dude, the ward saves down at the bottom and the keywords, you could barely see it. I don't really care, you know. Maybe if I was 80 and I can't read, I'm like, using my like magnifying glass. But as long as I know where to look, that's all I want. Sometimes you'd be like, where's my ward save? It's over here. Oh, but with this guy, it's down here. Like, you didn't know. Now I know, like, keywords. It says ward. It gives you the ward, right? I know. So that's fine with me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else with the Warscrolls. I did see there's wizard power, so it seems like that's where a lot of the spell casting determination is for how many spells you could cast, which, by the way, you know, they're keeping spells and prayers. They haven't talked about it yet, but I'm sure I think they're supposed to, like, next week, so that's pretty cool. And I'm just so far from everything they've shown, I'm really liking what they've done. Like, even the new command system. I think the new commands are some of my favorite things they've showed off. Because, again, this is another confusing thing. When you would play the game, especially as a new player, I would be like, how many command points do I get? And it's like, okay, I have my general. I'm going second, so I get one. But then, wait, my general died. Now I don't get one. It was just like, there's so many things to remember that it didn't have to be like that. And then you would lose your general and it sucked and it felt like you were just falling behind. So now it's just any ability with a command point cost is a command. Each player gains 4 command points at the start of each battle round. The underdog gains 1 extra command point, which I think is pretty cool, having the underdog mechanic. Because there's going to be some people like, yo, I'll tank to be the underdog. But then at the same time, you're tanking. So there's always risk in that. Each unit can only use 1 command in each phase, which I think is great. Each command can only be used 1 time by each army in each phase, and you must pay the command point cost to use a command. So some commands now cost 2 command points, kind of like in 40k using stratagems, which I also think is cool for, you know, really powerful abilities. I'm sure there's some, you know, faction-specific powerful ones, but things like countercharge cost 2. That's a pretty powerful command ability, right? It's pretty good. And, you know, being able to cast a spell in your opponent's hero phase is also really cool. And I love the amount of kind of like reactionary play they're giving in your opponent's turn. I've seen some people be like, I don't like that. I'm like, why? Like, otherwise you just sit there, like, you take your turn, to go on my phone. Like, wow, so fun, right? Like, I think it's cool where every time they move, you're like, hey, maybe I'm going to countercharge. Maybe I'm going to redeploy. Maybe I'm going to magically intervene and try to cast a spell because you got close to me, and I'm going to, you know, do a spell that tries to blow you up, or a spell that, like, ports me away. Like, I think it's cool. Like, and then your opponent has to think about, are they going to use that spell? Like, are they going to use a command point to do the spell? Maybe they don't want to use their command point, you know, and it creates this back and forth of, like, you know, if I do something, are they going to do something, right? Which is fun. That's a strategy game. So, like, it's adding layers of strategy, which I think is the point. So I think it's great. I love the new rally. I mentioned it earlier. It is just, oh my God, I hated old rally. The fact that you would just Fire Slayers. The amount of times you would just kill Fire Slayers and it's like, they're back. And you're like, cool. That's really fun. How, like, I killed 8 of them and now 7 of them are back. That's really neat on the 4-up rally. So I love that it's a combined heal or return model based on their wounds, because there's also plenty of times where you couldn't rally because there'd be a model that was like half health or something. So now you can be like, oh, I heal them up, I bring back a model. You know, maybe you just you roll really well, you can bring back a high wound model, but otherwise, you know, you can just heal something up. I think it's just cool that you have that. And it's obvious that they're gonna have, well, maybe not obvious, but it seems pretty clear, at least to me, that they're gonna play around with this. So instead of being like, oh, you have a 5-up rally, a 4-up rally, it's instead of each 4-up you receive a rally point, in each 3-up you receive a rally point. Or maybe you can make it so your opponent rallies on 5s, right? So they're -1 to their rally. So you can impact that in different ways, which I think is really cool. And I like that you can play around with that, so different armies play into these kind of core command abilities, right? Redeploy also happening at the end of the movement phase is nice. You don't have to just wait there and be like, I'm gonna redeploy that, and then they're like, all right, I'm gonna move another thing. You're like, I do actually like the redeploy change a lot as well. It seems like a lot of things are quality of life changes, which I like a lot. The other thing I saw is, if you look at the Warscroll on the keywords, how they've said they're going to use universal keywords, right? And it seems so far they're pretty good. I'm happy with the universal keywords that they've chosen so far. Like, there's obviously like champion, leader, things like that, but there's things like anti-infantry, crit. I think crit is just one. There's like charge, companion. I've seen like crit mortals is another one, right? So I think I actually really like when it's just like basic. You know what I mean? Like in 40K, it's like devastating wounds, or like you got to be like, wait, which one's devastating? This is just like crit mortal, and you're like, oh, okay. So when I crit, it does more. Like, I would rather it that. You know, you know what I mean? Like, I love the simplicity of not having to think about stuff. And it's kind of like that with Old World too. I'm just like, wait, this thing has like stupidity. It has lumbering. It has this. I gotta look it up. Gotta look it up. And I love that they're just like crit mortals. You can figure it out. And I'm like, wow, I can figure it out. I don't even really have to look this up. So I'm happy with that. Then they also brought up the battle traits or battle formations, where these are the new sub-faction abilities, right? So they brought up the Thunderhead host, which prioritizes mixing and matching units from the various chambers with its synchronized strikes passive ability, empowering warrior chamber units in combat while they're within 12 of a unit from members of a different chamber. So it's add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly warrior chamber units while they are wholly within 12 of any friendly non-hero Stormcast Eternals units that do not have the warrior chamber keyword. So, I mean, it's pretty much sub-factions without, I think, having to really tie units and stuff into it. You can kind of play around with it. It was what I'm kind of hoping, which I think is cool. I think my biggest issue with a lot of sub-faction stuff was tying battle line into it, right? So it was like, this thing becomes battle line. But now it seems like battle line's just a thing of the past. You make your main list building thing, which I guess I didn't talk about that either, right? How now you take a hero and they can take regiments, and then you can bring units with that, and it becomes a 1-drop essentially built in. And then you also have the auxiliary, which is just like take what you want. So you can like get bonus command points if you have less drops, and the auxiliaries, you don't really get the bonus. There's a whole thing behind it, right? I'm sure you've read it, but it seems like the battle line and all that stuff is gone, which I think is great. You can just bring what you want, you know, and people are talking about the thematic aspect of it. They're like, what about the thematics of all these things and like sub-factions and stuff? Like, to me, I think the thematic aspect of the army is having a hero and he brings units that he leads. Like a Saurus warrior is bringing his, or Saurus champion or something is bringing his Saurus warriors, right? It's thematic. Like, I think that's pretty cool. And then he can buff them in certain ways. And then you can also bring a skink hero, and he's got his skink guys, right? That's kind of where you keep the thematic feel of the armies. And then you can play around with battle formations or whatever to change up how it is. But I think it'll be cool how maybe battle formations affect a lot of units while also not limiting how you can do it. So, for example, if you ran like the Saurus formation or sub-faction, now I'm like, I can't even, where it would be like +1 to wound if you charge, right? And it was like, okay, so I have to run Saurus if I'm going to run this, and that it like tied you into that. But now if it's just like +1 to wound if you charge for just anything in your army, like now you can play around with that. You could do like Skinks charging, you could do Saurus charging, you could do Saurus and Skinks all charging. You could have different types of things. So that's what I'm really hoping for, is that it just leaves it more open-ended and allows you to play around with different things, right? Or like, you know, have like a spellcasting one, a cavalry one, like different, it's more open-ended. That's really what I'm trying to say, right? And I hope that's what they do. And then, I mean, aside from that, I'm happy they're keeping spellcasting. One thing I really enjoyed that I kind of missed the first time around is that it seems like the monster tables are gone, the bracketing tables. Because if you look at the Nagash Warscroll that they showed off, instead of bracketing, they made it so when he's below a certain health, his magic is worse, I believe. His magic casting is worse. Oh, here it is. Okay. I was trying to find it. So battle damage is what they're calling it. It says, while this unit has 10 or more damage points, subtract 3 from its power level. So I think that is a cool way of doing this, because having to keep track of like which bracket am I at, which thing is happening, like my guy's terrible now, he's okay. You know, now it's just like you're hurt and it affects you in some way and that's it. And I think that's a much simpler, still effective way of doing it, where you obviously don't want to take a bunch of damage. It's going to hurt you in some way. So obviously his power level is probably his casting ability, right? Like, I believe he's a Wizard 9 is what it says. So maybe his power level is 9. They haven't actually shown off power level. That's what I would assume is his power level, but maybe it's not. But let's say it's 9. So now if you're subtracting 3, so now he only casts 6 spells instead of 9. So that's still very impactful, but you don't have a whole table of like, now he's -1 to hit, now he loses a damage, now it's like, right? It's just one bad thing. I also noticed that he adds 2 to his casting rolls while it has not miscast any spells this turn. If it miscasts a spell, ignore the restrictions that would stop this unit from casting any more spells this turn. So the fact that Nagash has +2 to cast, to me, says that they're going to be very selective with how they give out these plus to cast. Like right now, there's like +3 to cast, +2 to cast, +1. Like Nagash is the supreme lord of the undead. He's at +2. So I feel like Slan are probably +2. Lord Croak, probably just +2, maybe +3. I don't even know if they're going to give out +3s. I guess we'll find out, but I feel like Nagash would have +3 if anybody, right? So I think there's going to be a lot of +2s. I think a lot of the smaller wizards probably at +1, and then just like baby wizards maybe at +0, right? So we'll see what happens there, but overall, like after looking through all this stuff they've shown off so far, I'm just excited. I'm pretty excited. I'm excited that it seems like they're keeping a lot of the core of what Age of Sigmar is, but they're just fine-tuning it to a way that's much more easy to play, easy to read, easy to understand, more reactive, and I think probably more balanced, because I really like that every Warscroll is just getting redone. And it feels like they like I said before in my previous video, they talked about how they laid out every unit and thought, what does this unit look like it does? Does it look like it's tanky? Does it look like it does a bunch of damage? How would you think? Like, and they kind of went through every unit and did that, which I think is really cool. So we'll see how that plays in. We'll see how like point values and stuff, because I'm sure there might be something where it's like, wow, this thing feels really thematic, but it costs 400 points and I'm not taking it, right? So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff like that, but I'm excited. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how Hot Rat Summer 2.0 goes for me. And I'll keep making some videos talking about it. So thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll see you next time. Okay? Okay. See ya.